Okay, so I did this one last night, just was chilling, and so did this. It's pretty much done just on one layer. Uh, the there's just a couple duplicates because I want to do a couple small things. Anyways, so I'll just do some more practice today. First, I just wanted to show you the errors in this. Um, so, I mean, obviously you can see them, but let's just make them more obvious. Okay, so let's make this smaller. Okay, so in the foreground here, there's really no interesting elements. There basically is no foreground, and so it just kind of feels empty. So if you cut that out and you just sort of look here, then it seems like it's has more composition or whatever, but maybe you'd need something in the foreground here, like some sort of foreground element that would make it more interesting, and maybe not have the foreground element be these tall trees, because that kind of like takes away from the idea. Another thing is the perspective of these trees is a little bit too rigid. Like all these are like directly on a line, which is exactly how I created it. Obviously they're at different elevations, but the perspective isn't particularly accurate or even that useful. It's only meant to sort of drive you back towards the edge of this cliff here, where there's meant to be a loss of focal point in the water, and then you're supposed to look up and see the clouds. So ultimately, my idea, the simple idea of the composition was just a simple thing like this: push into like a focal point, have like a blurry focal point behind it, and then push up into the clouds and have the clouds be cool and interesting. And so I feel like I did the clouds right. I feel like I did the focal point okay. This is like, I kind of like the texture, so maybe like a half point on that. And for this, it's just like, nah. I just didn't think about it that much. So I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that. What about the colors? I like the colors of the sky. I think that's nice enough. The dirt feels actually muddy to me. Maybe a bit like clay, but even stickier clay than would be natural. So I don't know about that. But yeah, it was good fun doing this. So I was just like, you know what? Why don't I just do it again? Because I got so much more comfortable doing it this time than I did it the previous time, and it like helped the fact that I was more comfortable with it, because obviously I'm doing everything back to front, like I'm starting with the background of the sky and then sort of moving forward to the lights, and further forward, and then slowly to like the mid ground, and you know and until I'm bringing forward, until I'm doing darks and stuff like that. So um, yeah, I I'm not used to working that way, and it's tricky because it's more challenging on your mind to conceptualize and keep in mind what's coming next, rather than you know drawing something and then sort of drawing off that thing and then drawing something relative to that thing, so that then you have an idea what that is, and then you draw something relative to that thing. you know that's normally how people draw, is they have a starting focal point which then everything branches off of, and is measured up against, and it sort of becomes like the control. Instead, here, the control is literally just the sky, and then the control is just the clouds, and then the control is just like some of the ground plane, and then the control is like the furthest back points of features. and then it slowly comes forwards, and that's tricky. It's tricky to do. So, yeah. Um, I'm going to do it again without any reference. Like, this isn't looking at a picture or something. This isn't, and I'm also not gonna compose a design idea either. I'm just gonna go random. So we'll see. See what happens, huh? All right, so one thing I do want to do here is just play a lesser adventurer on the background. Just because I've written more of it, and yeah, I didn't put it on stream, so if you want to listen to a lesser adventurer, you can have it on stream while I basically paint something. Alright, go!
A lesser adventurer. I thought I was lucky receiving a quest from the guild to clean the greasy storm drains around town. Slimes like to make a mess of things, you know. There aren't many of these jobs going. Most of us lesser adventurers are forced into fighting for our copper pieces. You could easily wind up losing a limb or even your life trying to clear one of the monster dens in the neighboring countryside. Far better to be away from all that, and at least today I was. Hey Paru, where you off to today? A broadly smiling man with a hoe over his shoulder called out as I headed up the road through the farmlands. Got lucky today, see? I said as I lifted a bucket and scrubbing brush. Oh good, he said, relief showing in the smile in his eyes. Awful business those dens you fellas clear out, but we couldn't feed the city without ya. I looked back at him with a curt nod and continued on my way. I couldn't help but be envious of him out there in the fields, tending to the earth amidst the fresh smells of the harvest. It would be a nice way to make copper, but those jobs go even quicker than the one I scooped up today. It was a 1 in 1,000 kind of thing, at least to a guy like me. Steady work would never come to me that easy. Wading my way up the last of the bluffs, I came to the overlook and saw the city rise before the Great Leon River and the Vanguard mountain range behind it. Pale pastels as far as the eye could see and prominent fort towns nestled deep behind the walls. As I made my way down the long winding path toward the gates, the guards looked out of the corner of their eyes, only relenting once they discovered the tin tag hanging from my neck. I veered off the path and skirted around the outside of the walls looking for the best place to start. Ah, hi there little guy, I said as I knelt down to observe a little glittering dew ball as it crawled free from the storm drains. I couldn't help but feel an affinity to slimes. In a world full of monsters and magic, all they do is crawl around doing their thing, just like me. The adventurers are all trained in at least a little magic. The same is true of town guards, military, successful merchants, and military. Poor folk like lesser adventurers and farmers don't really know much about it. When they talk about the great 5 aspects and how they were granted life by noble magical beings, I don't really know what to think. To me, it doesn't really matter much whether I am of the great white elk of Astra, or the basilisk of Venu, the minotaur of Terra, the griffin of Leonis, or the phoenix of Icarus. So long as I have a positive outlook and the determination to take each step as it comes. The slime crawled towards the shrubs close by, probably startled by the sound of my bucket and brush. I eyed the metal bars carefully and thought about the best angle to align myself to get a good scrubbing position. Gripping onto a dry bit of the bar, I hoisted myself down and wedged myself into a crack. I coughed as dust and grime kicked up. Gah, it's fighting back, I said as I waved my hand. Anyone would think you don't want to be cleaned, I laughed before scrubbing again. Just put your back and shoulders into it, I told myself. That sounded like something a real adventurer might say, not that I'd ever rubbed shoulders with any. With their glimmering swords and full kits of armor, they might as well be nobility to me. I just carry this knotted old club, a shiv, and this simple hempen over cloth. But I'm doing a sight better than slaves, that's for sure, so I shouldn't complain. But that would be a better life, I said with a weak smile between scrubs. A breeze echoed through the aqueducts beyond the steel bars. The water tapped and rose in pitch until it rang like a bell. I narrowed my eyes and looked into the shadows, but from this awkward angle there wasn't any way I would make anything out. A shuffle and a skitter was masked by the sound of my brush as I continued on with my work. 5 whole copper, I smiled. That's the same as the bonus for clearing a full 5 dens in a day. Good gods, cleaning and hauling jobs were good when you could get them. I'd never cleared a full 5 dens in all my time adventuring, but I'd heard of some bronze class fellas actually pulling it off. Just imagine that, walking through goblins, boglets, warglings, and kobolds like they were nothing more than the lightest of resistances to your blade. All I can say about them is that they are vicious things, and they sprout up like nobody's business. I don't think I've ever seen a day where the guild boards aren't overflowing with new den sightings. Phew, this is hard work, I said as I scrubbed off the last of the grime on this set of bars. I picked up my bucket and splashed the water along the bars and then hopped back up to level ground and took a good long walk over to the next. Skitters. I narrowed my eyes, but unable to figure out the source of the sound, I just shook my head. Must just be my imagination, I said as I wedged myself into a prime spot to get at all the best parts of the bars. After cleaning the first bar, I gazed down into the shadows of the aqueduct, still unable to shake the feeling that something was in there watching me. Anything down there? I asked. I could have slapped myself for the stupidity of it. What am I doing? What kind of monster would even answer back? I waited for a moment to see if I could hear the sound again, but no dice. Up, I said as I scrubbed the last bar and then washed it down. I hopped out and headed the long walk around to the next, and continued the day, only really stopping for a short lunch. Dried pemmican, made of meat powder, half molded over grease, and dried berries. They weren't the magical sort of berries either, just weed blossoms, those tiny black beads at the end of rut grass. Were they even fruit? Or seeds? A real adventurer would probably know. Suppose it doesn't matter, they are sweet enough to contrast the meat, and that is what counts. Getting back to work, it wasn't long until I was aching all over and dying to stretch it all off, but just one more drain to go. I gripped up the brush and hopped out of the drain and onto the last for my section of wall. The sunset glimmered its deep red hue over my shoulder. At least I'll get done by dark, I mumbled, half relieved, half worried. I fumbled through my side satchel to make sure I still had a good light source. Let me think, I used up the shimmer guppy yesterday, and no lantern bugs either. Suppose it's up to you, my heroic little glob mushroom, I said as I pinched the little purple mushroom stem and put it just above where I was working. The purple light cascaded into the drain as I scrubbed relentlessly, determined to get the last of it before my heroic little glob mushroom's light faded out. Skitter. Ha! Ya. I screamed as its fangs dug deep into my leg. It gnawed and tore, its mouth foaming and rabid with disease. My hand shot back and reached for my shiv. Gripping it tight, I thrust it hard. The wardling screeched and hissed as it leapt back. I shuffled out of the drain and pulled myself out. Damned overgrown rat, I cursed as I pressed on the wound. I quickly grabbed for a length of bandage from my bag and scrambled to tie it tight around the bite. This isn't good, I told myself as I looked at the blood on my hands and looked back at the foam on its lips. It's got the rot. I hated to admit it, but this really wasn't good. I'm already malnourished, I haven't eaten magical fruit in almost a month, so my body won't have a good time fighting this off. I laid back as my consciousness faded. With the 5 copper I'd earned today, I could have saved up just enough to buy one. Guess this is just how it is. In this world, being born under the guiding light of an aspect means we are dependent on magical fruit to sustain us. The only problem is, when you don't get enough, your fate is decided. You lose your memories, and if you are weak enough you will wake up unaware of who you were before. What luck! I sighed. I really didn't think a cleaning job would be what did me in. Well, I hope the next me figures it out. I'm rooting for you, whoever you are. I reached toward the last of the sunset, trying to take in its beauty one last time, as I felt the wardling's foaming spittle inside of my leg, and the last of my light finally fading out. With a bitter taste in my mouth and bones as cold as the last of the night air, I struggled to open my eyes. Up, I said as I propped myself up on my elbow. Kubu. My eyes narrowed at the little glimmering sphere poking around near where my head was laid. I looked down to see another on my left boot. It hopped off and scurried off with the other one into what looked like an unusually clean storm drain. My eyes were drawn to a bucket and scrubbing brush sprawled out next to the cleaned bars. Ugh, my head, I said as I clutched what felt like 5 migraines at once. I stood up and looked at the massive city walls. Surely there is civilization on the other side of it, I just have to follow it around, right? It was easier said than done. With every limping step my bandaged leg ached with pain. What happened to me? I asked as I passed by another drain, and why can't I remember anything? Hoot hoot. Calls from the woodland nightbirds put me on edge. Why was I outside? Maybe I live in the city? And I hit my head. But that doesn't explain my leg. I was weary of the light woodland off to my left. No doubt it was the culprit to my current state in some shape or form. Perhaps I was chased after some kind of a fight and ended up tripping or something. Guess that would explain the memory loss, I mumbled to myself. As I walked, my body began to get a little warmer, and a little more feeling returned to my hands. Just enough, in fact, to notice the feeling of calluses on the pads of my palm. As I looked at my hands closer, I saw all manner of scratches and scars. Little cuts and holes were scarred everywhere. What kind of life have I been living up until now? I wondered as I passed another storm drain. Guess this rules out being a noble, I said as I realized the clothing I was wearing was just as ragged as my skin. I suppose I'll look for the lower part of town then, when I find the entrance. I passed by another storm drain and paused. Just how long is this damned wall? After a few more restless hours limping along its perimeter, I found my answer, and my salvation. 2 guards stood watch at a large gated entrance to the city. Hey there, I said with a wave, I think I got lost out here. Get a load of this guy, one of the guards nodded to the other. Damned bastards always pop out of the woodwork, don't they? You wouldn't believe the night I'm having, I said with my best attempt at a charming smile. Oh really? The guard replied. He looked down at the tin tag on my neck, and then at my wounded leg. The contempt on his face turned to exasperation, as though he'd seen something more times than he cared to remember. What are you after, Tin Man? The guard asked. I just wanted to enter, I replied. The guards looked at one another. Don't these guys usually work at the fort halls? You know, out in the sticks? You're forgetting the haulers and cleaners, the other guard replied. You got a hauling gig? Yeah, whatever, head in, the guard motioned with the tip of his long spear. Thanks, I laughed nervously as I passed through the gate's large stone massoned arches. The main road held several houses on each side, and led up to a large hall at the end before it split like a Y in both directions. The large hall looked important somehow, and torches flickered on the balcony suggesting it was still open, even at this time of night. I limped my way up the steps and knocked on the thick wooden door, only to hear a few voices chattering away inside, seemingly oblivious to me. I braced myself and then pushed my weight into the door, causing it to slowly swing open to reveal all manner of people talking amongst each other. It looked like a gathering of some kind, perhaps like a social club. A woman with tight silvered scale following the curve of her bust and waist down to the start of her legs chatted amiably with a man in robust-looking brigandine armor. A flowing spider silk dress gathered around her shapely legs, mostly translucent even in the torchlight of the hall. And 2 frilled strap supports on each shoulder exposed the skin of her neck, back, and arms. She turned toward me following the eyes of her conversation partner, and didn't bat an eye before turning back to him and their conversation. Don't worry about it, the man in plate armor said. The thought of those rats festering in the aqueducts makes me queasy, the woman replied. The guild will get one of the new licenses on it, they'll be cleared out by next week, the man reassured. I made my way awkwardly through the crowd of overdressed women and men with polished sword hilts to what looked to be a reception desk at the back. A genuine and friendly-faced beast folk girl turned her eyes up from the ledger she was reading. Can I help you? She asked sweetly. Maybe you can tell me where I am? I asked. Her eyes narrowed at first, but then she flushed with enthusiasm as she answered, the Eastern Wall branch of the Adventuring Guild. The Eastern Wall branch? How many guild halls are there in the city? I asked. Lots, but only the wall branches and the main guild hall are open at night. Wall branches are the best point for adventurers to gather before heading out to jobs outside the city, and is a good place to meet up after a job like these adventurers, she explained. Oh, and what does the Adventuring Guild do exactly? I asked. The mild-mannered beastfolk girl looked down with sadness in her eyes, and then she looked back up with sympathy. We take care of monsters and the like, clearing out dungeons and making sure the roads are safe for trade, things like that, she replied. This boy, she thought, he's asking such basic questions, he has probably lost his memories. I can see from that tin tag there, you are part of one of the lesser guilds? She asked. Lesser guilds? I asked. Yes, the ones established by the farming unions out in the countryside. Clearing lesser monster dens, is that right? The girl asked. This tin tag means I'm an adventurer? Oh great. Is there a place to stay here? Or maybe a job I can work to pay my way? I asked. The beast girl stumbled over her words as she replied, I'm sorry, but you would have had to pass the guild licensing exam to work as an adventurer here. Okay, no problem, how do I do that? I asked, looking around for anything that might give me a clue. Well, the tin tag is too low to take the test, you would have to rank up to a copper one, and after that to bronze. Once you have a bronze badge and you have done all your training, you can come here for the licensing exam, she replied. Oh. I replied. The awkward air in the room suddenly began to make sense. Adventurers here seem to be of a higher class than lesser adventurers. Do you have a silver coin on you? You know, for a magic fruit? The girl asked. I reached through my satchel and found 5 copper coins, is this enough? I'm sorry, but that is half what it is worth, the girl replied. But listen, she said with real compassion in her eyes, you should save that up, buy a magical fruit soon, okay? Okay, I nodded. This might be a silly question, but what is that? I asked. I thought so, the girl sighed. You are suffering from magical malnutrition, that is why you can't remember much. From the look of you, it is stage 2. Stage 2? I asked. It means you have been a whole month without a magical fruit, it's why you can't remember anything, the beast girl explained. The dire nature of my situation hit me like an oncoming carriage. I would wake up again tomorrow morning without memory of who I am or where I was if I couldn't afford a fruit today. How long have I been like this? Is this why I woke up with injuries? Did I go through all of this yesterday only to end up outside the walls? No. I quickly centered myself. This girl didn't recognize me and neither did the guards at the gate, so I can't have been around long. And on the bright side, I already have 5 coppers, which is half what I need for a magical fruit. I just have to find a lesser guild and work enough to get 5 copper. Only problem is, I don't know how much money is worth. For all I know, a copper is a week's wages. Can I ask how much a copper is worth? 2 hours work is normally worth a copper. Most people make about 5 copper a day, she explained. That explains why I had 5 copper in my satchel then, I thought. Can I ask how much things like food and shelter cost? Most meals in the city are 2 copper and the same for lodging, but in the lesser guild halls you can survive on half that, she replied. Oh, that is great news, I thought. But only at the lesser guild halls, she continued. They have big bunk rooms out the back, and a kitchen where you can get some food, each at just a copper. I see, so I need to make 7 pieces of copper today if I want to sleep under a roof with a full stomach and wake up with my memories intact. But it sounds like a whole day working will only be worth around 5 copper, and I think I need to make 7 before tonight, I replied, more to myself than the receptionist. The girl smiled at me, politely hiding the strain on her face. I looked around the hall to see a few of the adventurers glaring, clearly unimpressed by me taking up their time. Just one last question, I laughed nervously. How would I get to the closest lesser guild hall? It's about an hour's walk following the main path outside the eastern gate, she replied. And that is the gate just down the road, right? I said as I pointed back at the door. Yes, she smiled nervously. Really, thank you so much for the help, I replied. You're welcome, good luck, and visit us again when you pass your licensing exam, she called out as I left. Wait, weren't you going inside for a hauling gig? A gate guard asked as I passed. Guess I made a mistake, I said as I rubbed the back of my head. I told you he wasn't hauling. I mean, look at his leg, the other guard argued. What? You are the one who didn't even remember tin men do hauling jobs. At least the receptionist at the guild was nice, I thought as I made my way up to the top of the hillside. As I looked across the sprawling hills and farmlands, I gasped. The way the starlight caught the treetops of the scattered woodlands and flickered across the vast fields of wheat made it look like an ocean made of silver. Far in the distance, a fort town stood at the top of one of the bluffs. I made my way over the cobblestone path until I steered through the farmlands onto a gravel path. As I walked, I admired my boots. They were sturdy and well built, and seemed well suited for traversing even the wilderness around here. My clothes, not so much. I tugged at my belt and side satchel. They were sturdy too, made of good leather and strong stitching. I guess it is about practical gear first out here for lesser adventurers. Things that stain or wear down are probably just replaced with more of the same to keep expenses low. The walk was longer than an hour, but even so I found myself at the base of the fort town looking up at the guild flag as it billowed in the cool night breeze with a sense of pride. The flag looked like a handshake agreement between farmers and the guild. Maybe it wasn't so bad to be a lesser adventurer if they are helping out the common folk. Alright, just need to make 5 copper, and after that push for another 2. I looked down at my tin tag and squeezed it tight. This can work. Walking into the guild, everything was quiet, and beside the doorway was a box full of knotted branches, sharpened sticks, and improvised shivs. Most of them looked to be smashed into shape rather than crafted, so it begged the question, who exactly made them? Perhaps they were leftover loot from fights? Did other adventurers just leave them here to share? I headed toward the table centered at the middle of the entrance hall and waited for the girl sleeping at the desk to notice my approach. Would it be rude if I woke her? I thought. I looked past her to the wall at the back of the hall. As I walked over to it, I saw that it was actually a map of the area, and it had little red markers scattered all over it. To the side of the map were boards written in an unusual runic language. Guess I can't read it, I said as I stepped back. It really is strange. This place looks more like a war room, while the other guild looked like a social club, I thought. I guess each lesser guild takes care of a certain territory. I rubbed my chin and tried to figure out next steps on my own, but it was useless. I needed the receptionist to help me if I was going to read anything. And I need to ask her what everything pays. And even if I did kill a monster, how do I get paid? Do I take an ear, a toe, or do I have to bring a whole body back? I moved back to the receptionist's desk and peeked over the top as the mousy blonde-haired girl purred rather than snored. She looked unremarkable in every way, but something about her face was familiar. The way she sniffed and bit her lip as she slept was nostalgic somehow. It was like a memory existed, but it was distorted like an echo from far away. Ahem, I coughed as softly as I could, then tapped on the desk with the tips of my fingers. Heya? You awake by any chance? Ha? She grumbled and sniffed, before murmuring something I couldn't quite make out. Sorry, I just need a bit of help, I continued. Oh, she said as she scrunched her face and wiped her eyes. Sorry, it's been a quiet night, she smiled. Oh, it's Supara, she said as she reached behind the counter. The jingle of change sounded as she put down 5 copper on the counter. My eyes opened wide. I was shocked. You know my name? I asked as I looked at the coins in disbelief. And she is paying me almost everything I need, without even asking. How is my luck this good? I must be blessed, I thought. I swallowed hard as I gingerly took the coins in my hands. I put my hands together in thanks and bowed my head. Thank you so much. You're welcome, she said before she laid her head back down and gently slapped her gums. Sorry, but I need a bit more help if that is okay? I asked. Really? She said as she opened one eye. You normally go straight to the bunks when you get back this late. Well, until a moment ago I didn't know my own name, so thank you for that. We know each other, right? The receptionist sat up and alertly looked into my eyes, trying to gauge if I was making a joke. No way, don't tell me. Not again. Poru. I wanted to laugh it off but couldn't ignore the truth. Yeah, sorry, but it's true. I guess something happened and... I told you it isn't safe to wait so long for a piece of fruit, she said. It seemed like she had more to say but contained it behind pursed lips. I know, I am sorry, I said with a bow. I guess it can't be helped, she said as she stood up in a huff. How much do you have? I have 10 copper, I replied. Just enough then, follow me, she said. She turned and led me to a door just off to the side of the big map. We entered the back room where candlelight flickered in little tin holders. She moved aside a box and pushed a key into a metal hatch on the floor. As she opened the seal, the room came alive with magic. She carefully sliced off the thinnest portion of fruit and then shut and locked the box. Here, she said as she shoved her finger toward my face. You need this, she replied. I pulled out my copper coins and put them on the desk next to her before taking the slither of fruit. I thought I needed a whole fruit. I asked. Just eat it, she said as she pushed the slither right up to my lips. As soon as it laid upon my tongue, it felt like the whole world slipped away to reveal another. It was like having been awake with no sleep for several days and then finally waking up after a well-needed rest. The strain in my head faded, the ache in my joints from the bite drifted away. My eyes fluttered and I shut them tight out of self-consciousness. Swirls of energy danced all around me like sweeping winds and then, like that, they were gone. I stood in the room looking back at the receptionist with a force of clarity. Wow. I said as I gathered my thoughts. Yet, try as I may, I still couldn't remember anything past the fog in my mind. You need to save for a fruit sooner, you can't keep wiping like this, she said with teary eyes. She sniffed and thought to herself, at least he came back. I looked back at her, uncertain about how to feel about how ripe with emotion her words were. There was no doubt she was familiar to me, but faint traces were all that were left of my old memories now. I might know her, but I don't know anything about her anymore. I looked at the simple hems and seams on her dress as she led me out of the room and back into the main hall. I wish I knew her name at least. I need to thank her, or do something, I thought. Halfway back to the desk, I did all I could think of to do. I pointed over to the boards and just blurted out a question. Actually, is there any chance you could help me understand this stuff? I don't think I can read yet. The receptionist stopped and stared back at me for a moment. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to sigh, but instead she smiled. You really don't remember my name, huh? She said. Yeah, sorry, is it that obvious? I replied, I've been trying since I got here, and I thought the fruit might help, but still no luck. That's okay, I guess we just have to start over again. Well, if that's the case, I'm Rue. Pronounced Rue and EY. Like, EY, get out of here.
Hey.
She said with a hop in her step. Ah, of course. Rue. I'm Paru, I replied. Nice to meet you, she said with a curtsy. Thanks for remembering me, and helping me with the fruit, I really appreciate it, I said sheepishly. It's okay, it's the least I can do. Oh, you had a question about the boards, right? She replied, they are the request boards, they are for the tasks that aren't to do with clearing monster dens. What tasks? I asked. There aren't any at the moment, and everyone scoops them up when they come in, but they are all kinds of things, clearing and cleaning, hauling, message delivery and errands, or even special requests from the union sometimes. Those jobs sound decent, I replied, too bad there aren't any, huh? The girl spun on her toes and pointed to the wall map, and these are the dens for our adventurers to clear for the day. For the day? How are there so many? I asked. And if you do 5, you get a bonus, 5 whole copper. She said enthusiastically. Oh, really? 5 copper. That sounds great. I replied. I wasn't sure about fighting monsters, but if I can get paid that much as a bonus, it just might be worth it, I thought. I know what you were thinking though, Paro, that's great, but how can I beat a monster in a fight? Rue continued in a strangely overpracticed way. You are right, I was just thinking that, I replied. Well, the lesser monsters aren't really dangerous one-on-one. We aren't here to wipe them all out, just to keep their numbers in check so they don't end up spilling onto the roads and farms. I nodded along, appreciating her explanation. Lesser monsters can get in a frenzy if left too long, their packs get large, and it can get ugly, she added, but when we do our job right, the meat they leave behind feeds friendly beasts like wolf packs and all kinds of creatures, which keeps those creatures away from livestock, she continued. Wow, sounds really important when you put it like that? I replied. You bet it is. She smiled, you won't need special training to beat them or anything, but when you can afford it, it will definitely help. The lesser monsters around here are boglets, warglings, goblins, and kobolds. They are about 3 to 4 feet tall, and aren't all that strong compared to an average person, so it is totally possible for you to kill 1 or even 2 if you are clever about it. And for each one you bag and bring to us, you get a copper. Heck, I could even beat a boglet. I think. This is sounding better and better by the minute. I thought maybe I can do this. Lesser monsters rely on fast breeding as their survival strategy. So there will be plenty of them to bag each and every day without a doubt. All you need to do is grab a spare weapon from the box over there, pick a spot on the map and go do your thing, she finished with a flourish. Sign me up. I replied. You are already signed up, silly. Rue squinted playfully. But honestly, looking at the board, there really are a lot of them. Why don't the major guild halls just come and clear them up? They are super well equipped and well trained by the look of them, I asked. Rue sighed, and her shoulders slumped. Money. The major guild adventurers clear the roads, kill off stray monsters, and help stop dungeon outbreaks and are paid by the nobility and merchants in the cities. We however work with the farming union and there is only so much coin that farmers can spare. I'll be honest with you, Paro, I think you lesser adventurers are crazy, the way you put your lives on the line. Rue replied. Wait, wasn't she just saying it was all super easy? I thought. It shouldn't be this way. Most lesser adventurers quit after their first week because the workload is too much just to get by, and I shouldn't be telling you this, but we lost 5 adventure groups just this week, she said, more than a little disheartened. I'm sorry to hear that. I replied. The dens have been getting bigger because there just aren't enough of you guys out there. We have a few swarms in the area and sometimes people get caught up. Most of them just lost fingers, hands, arms, that kind of thing. But still. After that point, how can you really expect them to keep going? Rue sighed. Wait, they lost arms? I replied, more than a little shocked, geez, guess this really is a tough gig, huh? I looked down at my scarred hands and realized that I must have been close myself more than once or twice. I swallowed down tight, then looked over at the board. Wait, you aren't thinking of going to a den right now, are you? Rue asked, it's still dark. And you should never do it alone, partnering up is key if you want to be able to see them before they see you. Maybe I shouldn't go out just yet, I replied. I mean, I only need to make a couple copper today, so I can wait. I sat with Rue for the next couple of hours. She explained how to gather monster trophies and then we just talked, mostly about her family and growing up in the countryside. She isn't a fan of Axis City, which turned out to be the name of the one with all the big walls. She said it was for know-it-alls and big shots. It was hard to gauge how much of it was her own opinions and how much of it she had just overheard. I liked how candid she was about everything. She was just one of those people who was warm just by nature. She also told me how she was the youngest of her sisters, and she complained about how she got stuck on the nights while the other 2 handled things in the day. Rue's eyes got sleepier and sleepier as she talked, until finally a blonde-haired girl with bright blue eyes skipped through the door silhouetted by the early morning light. Hey sis, Rue grumbled. The blue-eyed girl stared at the 2 of us and lost herself in thought. Have you 2 been talking all night? Oh no. I said, waving my hands and crossing my head. I was just silly enough to lose my memory, and she was filling me in on how things work around here is all. The blue-eyed girl froze for a moment before she yelled, I told you not to wait so long. You'll never get to the main guild halls if you don't take better care of yourself. I know, Rue told me about it too, I replied. She sighed, do you at least remember my name? It's Tila, right? I said. Ha! See, I told you he'd remember me if he lost his memories again. Tila said proudly. No, he didn't, I told him earlier when I was explaining everything, Rue replied. Tila pouted. What is this feeling? I thought, why am I so drawn to her? As I asked the question, I felt an answer in the form of a silhouette of light in the form of a proud griffin standing over her. I could see magic flowing through her like streams of silver, and collecting in a little sphere at the center of her chest, just behind where her necklace hung. My eyes sharpened and noticed it was the wings of a griffin, shimmering in silver. Tila looked at me with a smug grin and then moved around to the side of her sister. I'll take over from here, you get home. Rue nodded and then waved to me with a short-lasting smile before she dragged herself out into the sunlight. She shielded her eyes as it hit her. Tila took her seat and then stared at me, swinging her foot and rubbing her necklace between her fingertips. I couldn't shake the feeling she was appraising me and testing me with her eyes. I'm sorry, I said as I scratched my head. I think I should get going. I moved cautiously closer to the door where I picked up a simple shiv from the box and waved goodbye. Wow, her eyes were intense, I said as I bathed in the sunlight. It was the first time I had ever felt the sun, so I couldn't help but stop and look at my skin as it seemed to sing just below the surface as the light warmed it. How can light be so warm? I thought. And dark is cold, I continued. There seemed to be something profound to the thought at first, but it quickly faded, and I realized that I was just standing outside the hall stuck in my thoughts. I looked up and saw the guild flag flapping gently in the breeze. Sounds of birds echoed from patches of trees both close and far. A flash of light gleamed bright, and as I looked down the path I saw one of the farmers walking along a fence line with some kind of steel tool with a curve on its edge. Wow, so cool, I said as I walked up to him. Are you a fighter? Or a guard? I asked. No, nothing like that. This is just to cut the field, the farmer said as he picked the tool off his shoulder and placed its shaft down onto the ground. The blade was curved and came to a point. It sure looks dangerous, I replied. I suppose, but I'd never use it as a weapon. Tools made of steel like this are pricey. No point wasting an edge like this on monster hides, the farmer grinned. Nope, this one is a herbivore. I wish I had something like that. Do they sell them anywhere? I asked. The smith's apprentice visits the guild in the afternoon with steel gear, but it'll cost you, the farmer replied. Yeah, I bet, just so I know for the future. How much usually? I asked. Probably about 2 silver and 5 coppers, the farmer replied. That is 5 whole days' work, I thought, and that is if a person had no expenses and had a regular income. How long did it take you to save for it? I asked. About a month maybe? The farmer replied. But every month I need to buy a magical fruit too or I'll lose my memories, I thought, so if I calculate costs for the whole month, 60 copper for living expenses, 10 for fruit expenses, and 25 if I wanted to save up. It all meant I needed around 100 copper a month, which was about 3 to 4 copper a day. Rue explained that a lesser monster trophy pays 1 copper each, and that sometimes they have scrap metal and valuables on them that might be worth half that. So if I just kill about 2 or 3 a day I should make enough, I thought. Well, have a good day out there, the farmer said with a tilt of his hat as he waded further into the field. I pulled out my shiv and squeezed it in my hand. Right. I just need to kill 2 monsters. I can do this. From memory I could recall there was a den just off the path up here and to the left. It was just past the second patch of trees in a gully. I followed the path until I was about where I expected the den to be and then squatted by the side of the road. There was a slope down into some tall wild grass and some sopping wet puddles or marsh. The water wasn't deep, maybe just a couple of inches, but it made the vegetation thicker. I narrowed my eyes and tried to sense through the gaps in the spindly trees and reeds, but I couldn't make anything out in the mottled patchwork of light and dark. Come on, I just want to see one of them, I thought. I remembered that Rue had said they were 3 feet tall, so I adjusted my eyeline carefully as I scanned through the brush. It was then I saw a reed bend and move. My ears pulled back and I turned my head to listen for sounds. A guttural purr sounded as the boglet vibrated the soft skin of its neck. Then shortly after, a sharp-sounding croak and a ribbit. My cheeks fell and my jaw opened as I gazed upon the creature as it waded out of the brush. It was almost human. But its arms and legs were thinner. Its eyes were so much bigger proportionally to its body, and a third membrane flicked across as it blinked. Between its lips were rows of sharp teeth. And as I observed it closer, I saw its fingers clutched tight around the end of a knotted club. It was just the same kind of club I saw in the box at the guild. I thought. The adventurers had defeated them and taken their weapons. I guess that is how lesser adventurers do things. They use what they have available, and what was available was the weapons the monsters made. Its webbed feet splashed as it stomped through the marsh. Its eyes blinked as it looked at one of the tall reeds, the glistening abdomen of a lantern bug calling to it. Its head tilted and its mouth snapped open and shut. I sighed and let my guard drop. The creatures didn't seem exactly evil. This one lived off insects, it seemed. Stepping back up onto the road, I wandered to the next den sighting. At the edge of the path, groups of boulders gathered and zigzagged back towards a small rocky overhang. Scary, I thought as I looked at the dark crag nestled between it. I can't believe lesser adventurers even go inside places like that. I pulled my cheeks back in frustration, more at myself than anything. I mean, what kind of adventurer just lingers on the outside of a den and leaves? Huff, I let out a chest full of warm air and straightened myself back up. The woodlands became thicker. Trees that were once only a foot across were now 2. Thickets and bushes were everywhere, creating a crooked landscape. There were paths through the woods, but you would have to be agile to change direction as many times as you would need to. "Yah!" A voice sounded from behind the thickets. "Get back!" The voice snarled out desperately. My ears pulled back as a shiver ran up my spine. Someone is being attacked, I thought. Oh no, I don't even know if I can help. I mean, I don't even remember what these things look like, let alone how to fight them. I shook in terror as my foot stepped forward. What am I doing? My guts twisted and my body burned and tingled inside as my other foot took another step. Why am I moving forward, even though I'm scared? I'm not ready for this. The roiling volcano inside of me spat and hissed, as what felt like magic surged through tiny trickling channels. It spread like quicksilver, until I felt my body shrouded by the shadow of some great creature. It felt as if this being was part of me somehow, and urged me onward. So subtle was the urge that I barely noticed it as it lifted my weight into my next step. A roiling mix of feelings collected in my eyes as I balled my fists and pushed off my legs into a sprint. Rawr! Leave green. Leave them alone. I ranted, still unclear as to what it was I was even yelling at. The creature's eyes turned to me at the same time my vision became clear. One of them began howling in some high-pitched cackle as it stumbled backwards. Another grit its teeth and pushed its victim aside to run right at me. Another 3 just looked at each other. My eyes flicked quickly across the creature's features, noting its knobbly knees and large feet. Its arms were long enough to reach its knees, and its body was slender. Pointed and thick-skinned ears came out from the sides of its head, as its yellow and bloodshot eyes locked onto me. Its tongue swirled behind an opening row of sharp teeth as it cackled madly. It pulled its shiv up behind its head and pounced. Ah! I screamed as I stumbled back just beyond the reach of its swipe. I lashed back with a swipe of my own, causing it to reset itself and scowl as it thought about how to best attack. It didn't think long and pounced from left to right as another swift stab was aimed at my neck. I ducked my head and pulled my arms up, just in time to connect with its forearm. I tossed it aside and readjusted my grip on my shiv, attempting to chase it with a straight thrust, but the creature swept under the strike. It spun in and landed a kick to my lower leg. My leg shouted up at me with a spark of pain that I had no choice but to ignore. I swung down at the creature, but was surprised as its arms grabbed onto my wrist. It was just strong enough to stop me completely, then push me off. It swiped at me close enough to almost nick my cheek, and I instinctively swung back. It hit with a sickening thunk. My shiv dug deep into its flesh and sent it toppling back, gasping desperately as the other 4 of them looked on in shock. Big one. It mad like badger. I not know if can beat if scab couldn't hurt, one of the goblins said to the others. No, this not worth it, another answered back before it scrambled to escape with the others. The goblin I hit that was once struggling now laid still, and so did the girl. I rushed over and knelt down to check if she was okay. My eyes searched all over her for stab wounds and blood, only to find a bump and a gash just beyond her hairline. Blood streamed down her face like red water as I looked through my satchel in a panic. I juggled a small roll of clean bandage as I pulled it out. I gently slid my hand around her neck and lifted her up just enough to get a good wrap around the wound. The girl stammered as her eyes opened. I quickly adjusted in an attempt to calm my movements. Sorry, I got here late, I said. No, that's not true at all. I think I just didn't see how many there were. They jumped on me faster than I expected, she replied. Thank you for saving me. Wait, you fought them on purpose? I replied. Yeah, of course, the girl said as she stood up proudly. I'm an adventurer. If it wasn't for the bandage, she would have looked like a proud hero standing victoriously in the breeze of a battlefield. Long straight hair blowing elegantly behind her, and narrow eyes, ice blue and sharp as an eagle. I rubbed my eyes as I saw flickers of a shadow surrounding her in the shape of an elk. It quickly vanished as my eyes followed her fingertips as they traced down her neck to the tin tag hanging between her blouse. Me too. I called back, but I'm kind of new. Actually, that goblin is the first one I ever remember killing. The girl's eyes flicked over to the goblin and then scanned me appraisingly. He stabbed it clean through the neck, she thought, and those scars on his hands and arms. He has been in a fight before. So you couldn't afford a fruit in time, I guess, the girl said with a sigh. I suppose times are tough for everyone. She dusted off her hand and then offered it to me. I'm Eliana, Leah for short. Nice to meet you. I couldn't hide my grinning cheeks as I replied. I'm Paru. Well, at least you remember your name, she said, and you aren't a bad fighter. She paused and thought for a moment and then narrowed her eyes on me. You wouldn't be looking for a partner, would you? A partner? I replied in a little shock. How could a girl as pretty as her think of me? I thought. You helped me when you didn't have to. If we were partners, I know you won't just run off. It is as good a sign as any that in time we might be able to trust each other, she replied. I don't know. I don't know how to be a partner or anything. I don't really know anything at all. Are you sure you want to do that with me? I replied. Her eyes narrowed. I already explained. Please don't tell me you are indecisive. Oh, no, of course I'd like to be partners. I just don't know if I can be useful, I thought. Well, good. Eliana replied. She looked at me impatiently and raised her eyebrows. Ah. What does she want? I thought. Aren't you going to grab that goblin's ear and check if it has anything? She almost commanded. I hurried over to the corpse and shielded my eyes from the gore as I searched. I pulled out what looked like the mangled remains of some tin trinket. Great. Eliana said with a beam in her eyes. Tin scrap like that sells for a copper. Really? That's great. I replied. I glanced at my shiv wedged deep into the creature's neck and gagged a little. Get it, Shiv, she said as she came closer. Your one is bloody anyway. With a quick flourish of her shiv, she plied the ear tip off the creature. And that is enough? I asked. Mechem, she said as she put the little piece of cartilage and skin in my palm. That means you've already made 2 copper today, enough for some food and shelter. Good job. Thanks, I replied. Looking at Leah, I could tell she was hiding a struggle. How are you feeling? Leah blushed, perhaps a little ashamed to admit the truth. I don't think I can fight more today. I think I need to rest. But I could watch you if you want to fight a den yourself? No, I'm okay for now. I'll just count today as a win. I got enough for expenses, and I met you. I smiled. Leah didn't know how to respond, so instead blushed and led us back to the road. The gentle silica of the road mixed with some soft soil and clay, it was broken up by little white quartz stones rubbed smooth over the many years of the road's use. My boots held firm on the surface and I quietly appreciated the cushioning built into them. By the time I looked up, Eliana was panting and sweating from the effort. Are you okay? I asked. I'm fine, she said just before her eyes rolled. I hurried to catch her and scooped her into my arms. Sorry, she said between panting breaths as her legs gained back a little strength. I wrapped her arm around my neck and shoulder and propped her up. Let me help you until we get back. She nodded with flushed cheeks. My other arm pulled her waist close as we very slowly made our way past the farmlands and toward the hall. It sat at the top of one of the bluffs, but behind it was a small palisade and a small stone fort at the center. I peered up at the fort beyond the palisades. It was likely a baron's residence, and probably housed a small military contingent within the walls, as well as the most important trade centers and merchant storehouses. I didn't know how I knew this, but it was obvious to me from a glance. With this observation came a question: why was I so good at numbers? Had I once been a merchant? Or maybe even been to a school? It was a question that was frustrating to ask because there was no way to find an answer. An even worse question was if I once had family or friends. If it was true, I had abandoned them along with my memories, and for all they knew I was dead. I readjusted Eliana on my shoulder as we entered the guild hall. Oh, Tila said as she hopped up from the desk and rushed over. It's her. I wondered where she went. I was going to give her orientation this morning. Wait, it's her first day? I thought. I just gave you your tag yesterday, you really shouldn't be fighting without a partner, Tila said to Eliana. Leah's eyes stared back at Tila like a growling wolf, before thinking better of barking back at her. I have a partner, can't you see? Tila gasped and flicked her eyes. Between us, you mean? Now stop making a fuss, I just need to lie down, Eliana said. She tensed her arm in such a way that it was clear that she wanted to go. I'm sorry, Tila, I'll come tell you about it later, I said as I led Eliana off. Near the back of the guild was a door on the far right wall. Once we made our way through, the smell of the kitchen came from the right, and the sounds of the mess hall to the left. Eliana limped and urged me forward towards the bunks, and hopped onto one of the straw mats laid on the floor. I helped her down and knelt beside her. Don't worry about me, she whispered, I just need to sleep is all. Her hand gently pushed my arm, before she tucked it under her head and closed her eyes. My eyes swelled with concern for a moment, but her soft breaths let me relax. I stayed for a little while until it was clear she was just sleeping. I pulled myself up and spent some time explaining things to Tila. She was surprised that I came back with a girl, but said that partners were important when adventuring. Eliana seems like a strong girl, Tila said, but be careful, it is like they say, sometimes the strongest oaks have their roots dug deep down in desperation. You think she's in some kind of trouble? I asked. No, I'm sure of it, Tila replied, a girl like that doesn't just wake up one day wanting to be an adventurer. And if she isn't in some kind of trouble, she'll quit before the week is out. I narrowed my eyes in the direction of the bunkhouse. What's your advice? Just remember your own needs, don't try to protect every new adventurer who comes through the door. Don't take it on your shoulders, if she quits or can't carry her weight, let her go, Tila said. I looked at Tila and couldn't sense any kind of deception. Her point was harsher than my view could ever be, but she really had seen things like this before and was worried about me. No doubt some young adventurer had tried to help others only to wipe over it before. I'm just confused, I replied. On one hand, adventurers need partners, but on the other you can't let down your guard? I know, Tila replied softly, it isn't easy, is it? Doesn't seem like it, I said. But you did good saving her. Just remember you don't owe her anything, it's the opposite, she owes you, Tila added. It just seems heartless, if I was to abandon her, I said. Just keep an eye on her, that is all I'm saying, and if you get a bad feeling, like she is taking advantage, come to me so I can talk some sense to you, Tila said with a supporting smile. I nodded. I didn't know Eliana yet after all. It couldn't help to be a little cautious before deciding whether I could trust her as a partner. I wandered around outside for a few hours thinking about everything that had happened, and as I did a restlessness grew in me. Is 2 copper really enough? Or am I holding myself back? I thought. It was hard to admit to myself, but I really was holding back. I was using saving Eliana as an excuse to not do anymore, and I couldn't afford to just stand around. Partner or not, I had to get another trophy. My goal was 2 monsters today, not one, and resting on the luck of finding a piece of tin scrap on it. If I was going to afford a good sturdy weapon to match my boots and waist belt in quality, then I had to get a move on. Otherwise, maybe I really would end up wiping again at the end of the month. No, I had to move forward. Footstep after footstep, I found my way to the edge of a thicket spying over what looked to be a boglet marsh. I bent my legs and tried to sneak closer for a better look to count their numbers. One of them was quite close, while I could see 2 others across a small pond, and heard another croak further back in the light woodlands behind. I have to do this, I said to myself as I rushed through the thickets. The tip of my shiv spun as I zoomed up to the boglet. Snap! The sound of a twig gave me away as it crushed under my boot. The boglet turned with a snarl on its lips as it leapt into the air and made my attack swing wide. Splash! Water sprayed out from where it landed, and the other boglets beyond the pond leapt into the air towards it, all of them now staring at me. A 4th boglet leaped to the edge of the woodlands. All 3 in the pond shrieked before leaping back towards me. I spun my head around in each direction looking for a way to run if I needed, and spotted a way back up to the path. As I turned back, the first one landed and swung its club. I stumbled to the side of the blow as the next boglet landed, its club thunked across my shoulder, tossing me off balance and sending a painful shock up through my neck. The last of the 3 landed and whacked me across my forearm as I shielded my face. Instinctively I lashed out but met nothing but air. The boglet from across the pond leapt behind the others as they all swung at me. As I dodged the one from the right and the left, the other one hit me in the stomach so hard that I thought I was going to throw up. I swiped my shiv wide in an attempt to push them back and then turned to run up to the pathway, but for whatever reason I was too tense to run at any real speed. As I weaved up the path, the boglets leapt over the shrubs on each side of me and swung their knotted clubs as I sheltered under my arms. 2 of the blows slid off without any damage, but the third hit hard into my elbow, so hard that it cracked and began to ache. I grit my teeth and tried to sprint for the road, but one of them clung onto my arm, as another one dived at me to bite with its vicious row of teeth. I felt another blow across my back, while I shoved my forearm across the neck of the boglet trying to bite me. Gah! Get off me! I yelled as I tried to thrust them off. But they only yielded a little to my shove before pouncing on top of me, now the fourth in their group joining them. Their hands snatched and grabbed at everything they could as snarls and warbles sounded all around me. Is this it? Is this how I die? I thought. A dark shadow loomed over me, and I heard the flapping of wings. My veins filled with quicksilver and my eyes lit up with light. No! I screamed. My arm spun out from my body with a force that smacked hard across the first boglet and then cleaved around to the second and then the third, and with a kick of my boot I blasted free from the fourth. Adrenaline pumped through my veins as I scrambled up to the road and left the thicket behind in a blur. A few hundred paces up the road I stopped to look back and saw nothing but an empty road behind me. I gasped for breath, and squinted one eye as it seemed scratched in the chaos. I looked down at my arms and saw several new cuts and holes. I had definitely been in that kind of situation before. I crashed into the grass on the side of the road. How does anyone kill these things? I said between huffs. I clutched my ribs and winced in pain. My elbow ached. I had welts across my back, and my forearms were already bruising. They're vicious. I limped back towards the guild and peeked into the hall. Tila was busy talking to 2 copper tag adventurers. I sighed with relief as I snuck my way to the bunks and laid down next to Eliana. I looked over at her with pouted cheeks. I don't think I can do this alone either, I thought. I guess I really am a lesser adventurer. Episode 2, 3 Days of Rain. Beads of sweat pooled on my brow as I heard the planks of the bunk hall creak and strain under the rap and shudder of the winds outside. My eyes creaked open to the gentle candlelight in the main hall. I looked across and saw Rue sweeping at the other end of the hall. Turning back to the hall I saw several dozen other adventurers snoring away and adjusting on their straw mats trying to find a more comfortable angle in the stormy weather. I rubbed my eyes and headed out into the main hall, and watched Rue for a moment as she finished sweeping some dust into a tin pan. "Oh hey Para," she said with a smile, "how was the first day?" I scratched the back of my neck and looked off to the side. I didn't really know how to answer. Truth be told, I felt ashamed of myself. I felt weak, and like I was too impulsive and stupid to really make things work. "I'm still figuring that out," I replied. Rue rested the broom up against one of the request boards and frowned, her eyes swollen with empathy. "That tough, huh?" "Well, I have a lot to be grateful for," I said as I lingered back by the doorway. Rue waved me over to a seat by the main reception desk and then patted the chair next to her as she sat down. Her eyes glistened in the candlelight as I sat next to her. I didn't know what else to really say, so we sat for a moment silently exchanging glances. "From what I know of you," Rue smiled nostalgically, "you are stronger than you think." I had to pause to take in what she said. Was I really strong? And even if I wasn't, I didn't know myself well enough to argue back. "Well, I guess you know me better than I do," I chuckled. "I do," she smiled. Her hand gently cupped over my own as she radiated warmth. "I just don't understand this world I started. I look across the bunk hall and I see dozens of adventurers like me, dressed in rags, fighting every day just to get by. And that is just what it is. We all accept it." Rue nodded and looked down. "I guess we are all too busy thinking about ourselves to really take in what is really happening around us. But you are right, this world isn't easy, especially for lesser adventurers." I put my finger into my side satchel and pulled a copper from it and slid it over to her. "Sorry, I dozed off earlier before I paid for the night." "Thanks Para," she smiled as she took it and put it in the safe box under the counter. "I didn't expect it to be raining," I said between buffets of wind. The hall doors buckled and shook against the rain. "Yeah, it came in quickly just after I got here," Rue replied. "Tila was cursing as she had to go out in it." I squinted and almost chuckled at the thought of it. Tila is nice, she was giving me advice earlier. "Oh yeah, what about?" Rue asked. "I met a new adventurer, and we decided to partner up. She warned me that while I need a partner to keep safe, I had to always keep in mind my own needs and to keep my guard up a bit," I replied. "That sounds like Tila." Rue sighed. "There is the other side of it too. You never know how valuable an honest partner can be. Sometimes they are worth every bit of trouble it is to keep them around." Rue smiled and poked her nose a little closer to me, cutely pushing me to try out her point of view. "People can be worth the trouble too?" I asked. I smiled. I certainly hope she was right. Rue took in a big breath and sighed. "Looks like today is going to be a difficult one." "Because it is raining?" I asked. Rue nodded. No matter what we do today, numbers will be down, which means the dens will grow in the coming week. Today will be hard, and the days that follow too. I didn't know the weather could matter so much, I replied. Rue nodded. Be careful out there today. I turned and looked down at her hand as she gently placed it on my upper arm in a soothing gesture. I've been meaning to ask. I started, why are you so nice to me? Rue was startled by the question but then smiled to herself, that's my secret. Just outside the hall doors I gazed out into the rain as the first of the sunlight peeked over the Vanguard Mountains. Light skipped just under the storm clouds to the east but quickly gave way to the darkness above the hall. Wind swept from the west causing me to squint my eyes. How can anyone hunt in a squall like this? I thought. Morning, Leah said as she made her presence known. I can feel the pull of her elk aspect like gentle vibrations across the edges of my skin. Each vibration is gentle like a soft white fabric. Scouts reported that the storm is 3 days wide, I replied. Well, guess we don't have a choice. You ready to get started? Leah said. Misham, I'm good to go. How are you feeling? I asked. I didn't get banged up too bad. I'm good now, ready to fight, she nodded. I held my breath as I walked into the chill of the rain. It soaked through my ragged hempen clothes before I had made it even a dozen paces. Geez, I said under my breath as we passed by the closest farmstead. Clouds from the west come across the Terra and Venu borders, Eliana called out. Lots of swampland, try not to get it in your mouth. It's not dangerous, is it? I asked through the downpour. Not usually, but sometimes tiny eggs from gatflies get carried up with the rains, Eliana replied. Gatflies? I asked. Their eggs are used in some common basilisk poisons, so it's just better not to drink it, Elian said.
Ew.
Got it. I wish I had a cape or hood, I thought as I squinted in a bluster of wind. There is a den close by, Leah said as she pointed through the brush just off the path. The canopy sloshed and swirled above us as we headed toward a small rock formation. The crack in the stone led into a small cave system. I paused at the entrance, unsure whether this was the best den to choose, but Eliana refused to register it as she entered. Here, she said as she pulled out a little purple mushroom from her pack and handed it to me, pinch the stem. My eyes opened wide as the little mushroom pulsed with a flash of purple light. Kobolds don't see violet light, Eliana replied, anticipating my question of if it was safe to give away our location. Okay, let's try to sneak and see them before they see us. I nodded and lowered myself to try to get a better feel for the stone floor. We crept from the entryway to a pillar of stone and then tried to look for signs of the monsters. I couldn't see anything, but Eliana's eyes sharpened. There is just 2 of them, she whispered. As I pulled out my shiv, Eliana touched my hand and crossed her head, her eyes pointed to the knotted club on my waist. Kobolds have tough scales, but fragile bones like birds. I nodded and put my shiv away and replaced it with the club. Eliana moved quicker than I expected to the pillar of stone just behind them. I had to change a gear mentally to keep up. She showed me 3 fingers, then 2, 1. Smack! The club hit hard on the back of the creature's skull, its tongue swirled and its claws tensed before it reeled back and turned towards us. Their slender lizard faces resemble small freshwater crocodiles, if their skulls had a conical section for the eyes and brain. The first one had colorful red hues in its scales, while the second was a mix of green and blue. I rushed towards the reeling one with red scales and swung hard. My swing whooshed past. Yah! It screamed as it slashed back with its claws. It hit across my arms but harmlessly deflected off as I shrugged to throw it back. The blue and green kobold shook off its surprise and leapt at Leah. Its claws sunk deep into her shoulder. Ah! She screamed as she threw her head back, and wildly swung to bash the creature off of her. Her swing connected with its arm and threw it off, leaving the open wound on her shoulder to trail blood down her arm. The creature hissed, red dots in its eyes glaring back at her. I swung again at the red one, only for it to dive to the side and lash at me with its claws. I turned my head as I pulled back out of range and stumbled back. The blue-green one dived at me but I swung my club, forcing it back. Leah eyed the red one again, her face full of determination. The creature scattered across the stone as it fell. Careful, she said as her hair whipped around behind her and she stared at the bluish-green kobold. I stumbled back out of range of its claws and lifted the knotted club above my head with both hands, and with a thunderous clunk brought it down. The creature fell down flat, blood oozing from its ear holes, and its tongue hanging lit between its jaws. Are you okay? I asked as I turned to Eliana. Yeah, she said with a wince. She pulled her water skin off of her side satchel and washed the blood off her arm before taking a bit of bandage to wrap over the wound. I looked at her with concern. Is she okay to go on? Wounds like that can't be normal for this kind of work, can they? I thought. Perfect, Leah said with wide eyes. They have dried fish on them. Here you go, that's our food for today sorted. And a trophy each, that's our beds. Oh great. I said as Leah snipped off a whisker under each of the kobold's jaws and handed one to me. Let's find another den, she said. Don't you want to rest a bit first? I asked. Are you kidding? We have the momentum, let's just get it done. Leah replied. I didn't see any way to argue with her, so I followed her back to the exit. Peering out into the rain again, I would have hesitated if it wasn't for her just charging on ahead. Next den isn't far, she said as she led a few paces ahead of me on the road by the old oak on the Gimlet farm. Okay, so kobolds and warglings are usually found underground. Boglets and goblins are found above. If it is a farm, maybe the irrigating ponds have boglets in it? I thought. As we arrived by the old tree, we could see the boglets waiting around in the little water channel already. There isn't much cover, I said. At least there isn't room for more of them to hide, Eliana replied. There are 5 of them, isn't that too many? I asked. No, Eliana shook her head. 5 is a small group for boglets, it's the best we are going to get. I nodded along. I couldn't even hurt one of them yesterday though, I thought. Could it really be that different with a partner? I pointed to a route through the farm. We can run through there if it gets too much. What do you think? Leah nodded. Sounds good. We positioned ourselves behind the old oak as we sneaked closer. I bit my lip nervously as I peeked around the trunk. I could see 4 of them but not the 5th. They all seemed calm as they fingered through the reeds, gobbling up lantern bugs. Whoosh. My eyes turned in shock as the Boglets Club almost got me.
Whoa.
I turned and stabbed my shiv deep into the creature's soft stomach.
Ouch.
Blarg. It shrieked. The other boglets turned and bounded into the air, each one landing with a plump. Leah shrieked as she swung her club at the creature. It stumbled back, and despite my shiv wound and Leah's hit, it was still standing. The other boglets swung wildly, each attempt a little too far out of reach to hit us. Leah and I nodded at each other and rushed at the wounded one both at once, but hit nothing but air as it dived backwards with a quick spring of its legs. No way. I said as my eyes opened wide. How are these lesser monsters? They are so hard to hit, and even after I stabbed it, it's still able to fight, I thought. I could feel tension rise up my arms and legs as I turned back to the other 4 boglets. I yelled out as a club smacked hard across my shoulder. The knot in the club dug into the muscle and felt like it cleaved the fibers apart. A thrum of pain shot up to my neck in a shockwave. Leah screamed behind me as the wounded boglet sunk its jaws across her collarbone, while another of the boglet's wild swings clanked across her forearms. I leapt into action, my adrenaline pumping as I gripped my shiv tight. I grit my teeth as I drove the shiv deep into its skull and tossed it off of her. Thanks, she called back as she smacked hard at the boglet that hit her with its club. Whomp. It went down with one forceful hit. Maybe they aren't that tough, I thought before turning quickly back to the other 3. The collision of their clubs against my neck and chest were so hard I barely felt it at first. My eyes flashed white and I stumbled back in a daze. My hearing came back first as Leah swung back at the creatures with a ferocious yell. Another one fell down flat, and I heard the splash as it rolled back into the channel. You okay? Leah said, her eyes swollen with concern. I nodded quickly and dashed forwards with my shiv. I drove it hard into the creature's side while Leah hit it hard with her club, sending it flying. The last boglet swung wildly with closed eyes as Leah leapt towards it, club raised overhead. It landed hard. I didn't wait, I just lunged after it and drove my shiv up through its jaw. As I pulled it back, the creature slumped down dead. Huff, 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 I could barely breathe, my body ached all over, and my eyes were wide from the adrenaline. Is that enough now? I asked as the rain poured down all around us. Yeah, Leah replied with one eye closed as she held her collarbone, little peg holes streaming with blood and rainwater.
Ouch.
Leah quickly searched through what the creatures had and revealed some scrap, and 2 strange-looking mushrooms. What are they? I asked. Food, they don't taste that great, but it will save us a copper at the kitchen, Leah replied. Oh good. Leah handed the metal scrap and the trophies to Tila at reception, and then came back over with a handful of coins. Here, 5 coins each, and 2 days worth of food for each of us, some dried fish and mushrooms, Leah said before she found a bench to slump down on. 5 coins is great, I chuckled, but we aren't in great shape. Nah, we are pretty beaten up, she chuckled back, but 5 whole copper plus food, while it's raining, we did awesome. I nodded and sat down beside her, rubbing my swollen neck and shoulder. Ugh, at a point there I thought it was getting easy, but then they all hit me at once and I was almost out. Yeah, I was worried you were going to go down. I don't know how you stayed up. I really didn't want to be fighting 3 of them alone, Liao replied. I guess it was really close, I said as I realized the hard truth. If I had gone down, Liao wouldn't have been able to fight them off herself. She would have had no choice but to run and leave me, I thought. I shook the thought off. It wasn't worth wondering about what could have happened. I was just fortunate that we got away with a haul. 5 whole pieces of copper. I smiled as I stared up and noticed stuffed heads of each of the lesser monsters of the region on the walls of the main hall. Boglets, the wild frog-like creatures. Wardlings, strange walking rats. Goblins, pointy-eared cutthroats. And kobolds, water-loving lizard-men creatures. As frustrating as it felt to be unable to continue for the day, I suppose it didn't really matter. We had really done it. We had cleared 2 dens, and done our duty for the day as lesser adventurers. But is this really it? Coming so close to death every day just for a few coins? I struggled for a moment before realizing there wasn't any other choice. My eyes drifted over to the quest boards as one of the callers talked to a man with a steel-capped helmet and well-crafted leather armor. I noticed the steel of the sword hanging at his waist and sat up straight to focus my eyes on it. He must be an adventurer, I thought. I got up and walked over as the caller pinned the quest to the board. What does it say? I asked. The man turned without a word and headed off as the caller crossed his head slowly. It's not the best of jobs for a tin tag. Why not? I asked again. It's about clearing out an anomalous den. That means a really big one of more than a dozen of the things. We will have to organize a couple of bronze teams to take it on, the caller replied. What's this one about? A man with a steel mace on his waist belt asked, a bronze tag swinging off his neck as he leaned over to read the request. Warglings? Nah, I'm good. His partner laughed. Yeah, only idiots would take on a wargling den that big. I stepped back from the board. Were warglings really that bad? Aren't they just big rats? I thought. Lazy adventurers, the man with the mace replied, probably had that request sitting on their own board for a while. Now they just shove it onto us. I don't even think that was a representative that brought it in, just some adventurer who didn't want to do it himself. Huff, typical. Well, guess I'm sitting today out, can't do much in this kind of downpour. I turned back and headed to reception, placing a copper down on the desk, for tonight. Para, you were soaked through, don't you know you can catch a cold like that? Tila replied in a huff. Follow me, at least warm up by the fire. Quick, take that off, Tila demanded, ready to pout if she didn't get her way. I looked around at the rest of the room nervously and slid my wet hemp shirt off my back. My skin glistened in the firelight, a sheen of water forming thickest around a long and torn scar across my back. I wouldn't have noticed it except for the tenderness in Tila's reaction. Oh my, Tila gasped, what kind of creature did that to you? Sorry, I don't remember, I smiled back. Tila's eyes swelled. Oh Paru. She quickly left, but not before I caught the sight of her hands trembling. I couldn't tell whether it was anger that made them tremble or if it was worry. Maybe the kind of worry about something you had no control over. Guess I'm a mystery to more than just myself, I chuckled to myself as I pulled the stool closer to the fire. Cool scar, Eliana said as she pulled up her own. Slop. Her blouse flicked in front of my face as she laid it out flat in front of the fire. My cheeks blushed as I saw the shimmer of light on her skin. I didn't dare look. She sat down in a huff. A brown strip of cloth still clinging around her bust, and hempen pantaloons. That wasn't to say I couldn't see something if I tried. The way the water clung to the skin didn't leave much to the imagination if you were to stare. If you look, I'll punch you, she said with a huff. I wasn't gonna, I replied. Yeah sure, she answered, her eyes probing in my direction as her cheeks blushed. What is with this pressure? It's almost like she wants me to look, I thought. I focused on the fire and the soothing feeling as its warmth delved deep into my skin. Smells of freshly stewed broth filled the air as the cook stirred large pots on the other side of the room. I glanced over to a corner of the fire that was closer to Leah and observed her in the corner of my eyes. She sat there with a stoic gaze as she stared at the fire. She was more confident than I would have expected a girl to be. Her resolve was firm and it was visible in how she carried her thoughts. They were obviously weighty, yet she felt no compulsion to share them. I wished I could have said the same, but I didn't have thoughts to share. How can I make conversation when I don't even have a story to share, I thought. As I glanced at Leah, it was clear that if she had a story she wasn't going to share it. Though something told me it wouldn't be unusual in this situation for other people to open up. You know. I started, you really did a lot out there. If Leah's interest was piqued, she didn't show it, right? You took out more of those boglets than I even thought was possible, I continued. Was her only reply. I just mean, I tried to fight some yesterday, and I couldn't even hurt them, I said. You're not thinking about it properly, don't tell me you are the kind to sulk on old wounds? Leah said as she made eye contact. You are untrained, poorly equipped, and have no skills to draw upon. Of course you couldn't fight them alone. Each fact shot me through the heart like an arrow. You don't have to put it quite like that, I mumbled. Fighting with a partner changes things more than you think. Not only can they hit you half as often, we can hit back twice as fast. How well do you think those creatures would fare against a person with 4 arms that was twice as hard to hit? She explained. My eyes opened. I couldn't help but imagine a monster with the agility of a cat. Are there monsters like that? I asked. Sure, in the dungeons, Leah replied. Wow, and I struggle with lesser monsters, adventurers really or something, huh? I answered. PFFF, Leah grimaced. Don't forget that you will fight true monsters one day, that is what we are aiming for, right? It hit me all of a sudden, she was right. If being a lesser adventurer was hard, being a real adventurer just might be even harder. My lip quivered as I bit down the struggle and pain of it. If it was truly harder than this, was I really just that weak? I will get stronger, so strong that not even the biggest of monsters will be able to stand against me, Leah said. That is what the future holds for me. The fire glistened in her eyes as she drove her sight into a place far away from here. I looked at her in disbelief. How could she have such conviction? I had to ask something to be sure it wasn't just an illusion. Don't you think being a lesser adventurer is hard? I mean, right now, I asked. Of course it is, she sighed, but that is even more reason I can't let it get to me. I'll never get anywhere if I think it will always be that way. So you think it can get easier? I asked. With more experience, better equipment, some training, and the resolve to go further. Yes, it's possible, she replied. It seemed so obvious when she put it like that. But a moment after the confidence the sentence infused within me faded, I couldn't shake a feeling stirring inside of me. Failure was the likelier outcome. Even if you look away. And was Eliana really able to look that truth in the eyes? Or was she desperately scrambling for the light at the end of a tunnel? Tila's words rang in my head. Sometimes the strongest oaks have their roots dug deep down in desperation. Was this what she meant? And what did it mean? Did it mean her desperation would make her stronger? Or that strength was an illusion? Or both? But how could strength be an illusion? I thought. I shook away the thought. No, it has to be enough. I have to believe that she can do it, I thought. I know you have it in you, but I guess when we are out there, we just have to find it, I said. Leah's eyes flicked over to me. What is this strength in him now? She thought. She simply observed me for a moment, and let a comfortable silence fill the rest of the conversation.
I know that looks like bamboo fields or something, but don't worry, it's just the first layer. It's just for texture, basically, and perspective, to bake in both. It's experimental. You'll see. Oh, come on. I don't know why they put this button on the stupid thing. It's really annoying. I can turn it off, but... You're transferred from a partner. Sorry, I'm just responding to a friend of mine, a text. Whew. Okay. Okay. The heck? Ba, ba, ba. Uh-oh. What happened? Okay, now the mountains and a bit more darkness. Okay, so the darkness, let's get quite a bit dark now. Ow. All right. Hmm. Now what I'd like to do is I like to do a check of colors and stuff. Just literally changing the colors around a bit and see what it tells me. What I usually find is that I like the original the most. Ooh, that's interesting. Hmm. This also tells me that it's super saturated. Alright, let's change saturations. Luminosity. There's other things you can do too, instead of just this basic thing. You can literally change like peaks and troughs and stuff. I don't want to do any of those things. That was cool. Interesting. Okay. Now. I guess maybe the only thing is like something in the foreground and something with warmth. So let's just do that. Maybe just have something like this. That second one doesn't make any sense. Maybe the first one doesn't make any sense either. Maybe a hand is better. Let's do some other warmth first. Maybe a flag. No, not a flag. But we do need something darker here. Kind of cool. I like it. Um, need something in the foreground though. Let's go foreground. Nah, I kind of can't be bothered because I can't think of something I want in the foreground anyway. Maybe the only thing I could do is like a flying beetle or something, or like a stem of a leaf or something floating past. just want a bit more darkness in those mountains. Nope, there's nothing I can do about that. That's just baked in. Fantastic. I could put a bird in the sky. That doesn't really matter. I'll just leave it at that for now. It was cool. It was fun. And I might have learned things, but we'll see. Alright. Take care, everyone, and make sure to have fun learning. Alright. Bye.